All right, here are our targets for today. Our targets are: describe the trade rights of Westerners sought in the Ottoman Empire and India. We are going to focus on India. We're going to explain how Britain comes to control all of India. And then number 3, we're going to identify the benefits and problems that non-Western countries face as a result of imperialism. Now, what we were going to do at the very end of this is we are going to do a T-graph that really focuses on what were the problems as a result of Britain occupation and also the benefits, because there were many. Okay, moving on. We're talking about India. All right, so India was a land of great diversity. Britain exploited that diversity to gain control. And as I said, with diversity, we're talking about differences. And in this classroom, as many people as there are, that's diversity. And for India, they really had a lot of diversity. All right, so India was the home of many cultures and peoples. And when the Mughal Empire began to crumble, these groups could not unite to expel outsiders, specifically the British. So just like the Ottoman Empire, you have a loss of strength in the empire, and as a result, then well-organized countries like Britain can come in and exploit that diversity, exploit those problems, and take over. So Britain took advantage by encouraging competition between rival princes, making it impossible to keep Britain or the British from eventually controlling India. Okay, so who and what was the British East India Company? They're going to be the first of the British to arrive in India. The country itself, Britain's government will come later. This is actually a business that will arrive. And as this describes, it's a British privately owned company seeking to trade with India. This company made alliances with local officials and independent rulers. It had its own army of sepoys, or Indian troops. They used their army to control the area by the 1700s. And this company is going to get an enormous amount of wealth. As a result, it's going to become extremely wealthy. But they were the first. Okay, I think most of you done. Okay. This group of soldiers, Union troops, they are going to mean the difference in who controls India. Those who control these troops will be those who control India. And under the British, they are going to succeed in basically unifying India. What you see here is what the British East India Company will eventually control. This whole area that you see, I'm going to use the cursor, this whole area that you see colored, get it over there, there it is. Okay, this whole area, all the way into and down through here, will be controlled by this company. And you can see this gets into areas. Siam at that point in time will eventually become Thailand. This is a large area of that. Through here, Burma, Myanmar, present-day Myanmar is in this area. Pakistan. This company controlled a huge area of land. All right. So the British East India Company's goal was, and primarily was, money. They were interested in making the money, and it did. The cost would be devastating to the Indian people, because unfortunately, remember we've talked and you've read about the idea of social Darwinism, the idea that the whites were more important, were the best, and that any non-whites or non-Europeans really didn't count. Social Darwinism was the idea of survival of the fittest. And clearly, the Western Europeans, specifically Britain in this case, were far more superior in their technology, in their ability to control other areas. So, and that's going to be devastating to the people of India. BECI, which I'm talking about, is the British East India Company. That's what BECI is. BEIC. Their troops will rebel, and Britain will take control of India from the East India Company. I won't go into the story right now because it's not necessary for you to remember, other than the fact that this company did not rule well. They pretty much took advantage in every way possible of the Indians and did not respect their traditions or their culture. And as a result, caused a rebellion, and that rebellion killed thousands. Well, I shouldn't say thousands. It killed many of the whites, and then in turn, the British came back and killed thousands of theirs. So British policies aimed to improve India, even though prior to this it wasn't so much about improving India, it was about getting their money. But when Britain takes over, the country itself takes over, that's when the policies changed to try to improve India. Britain felt that they were helping India to modernize, but let's face it, ultimately the policies were all about helping the British. Okay, we good? All right, moving on. All right, so Britain places a guy that's called a viceroy. That would be like the governor of India, and he rules in the Queen's name. And high officials were British, but Indians held lower posts. So, as we talked about in the Ottoman, we talked about that at the beginning of that. At the beginning, I identified the different types of rule, and this is you're going to see India becomes the poster child for indirect rule. The local officials remain in place. Much of the government is run by the locals, but the top positions will be British, and those locals will depend on the British rulers as to what they're allowed and not allowed to do. So, ultimately, we'll talk a little more about that. With some cooperation from some Indians, India does become what's known as the crown jewel of the British Empire, which is a big deal. Britain benefits enormously from India. The amount of wealth that comes to Britain as a result of India will be beyond what they expect. Anything from cash crops to cloth to food to diamonds. The diamond, the main diamond, which is huge, is called the Kohinoor. The huge diamond that is in the Queen's crown comes from India. It's been around a long, long time, but the Kohinoor is one of the largest diamonds ever found. And in the quality, it's a near perfect diamond. There is no such, by the way, for just a little trivia here, there is no such thing as a perfect diamond. Do not believe the commercials. It is not true. Diamonds you cannot find a perfect diamond unless it's been made by a manufacturer. Then you can have perfect. But in nature, there's no such perfect. There's near perfect, but not perfect. I used to sell diamonds just for you. Just a little information there. Trivia. Okay. So British leaders assumed that providing the Indians with British education would lead them to accept the British culture and rule. They were so wrong. The opposite takes place. Educated Indians returned home and began nationalist movements for self-rule. this movies were all about, was self-rule. I'm sorry. So we pretty much there? Okay. Again, I want you to remember back to doing the Ottoman Empire and back to the rule that I talked about, the different types of colonial rule. Again, remember, Britain is an indirect ruler, and part of that indirect was sending the kids off to be educated in England. That was a big deal. And their hopes were that the Indians would then see that British culture, because remember, these are extremely arrogant people, because their culture, they saw their culture as so successful, they believed that others would see that as the same. So off went these kids to become good little British subjects. Unfortunately, what they came back with was an understanding of democracy, an understanding that self-rule is best, and they then promoted that within their country. Perfect example of this was Gandhi, you saw in the video. Gandhi was just exactly that. He was an educated Indian, came home and said, this makes no sense. From the very teaching that I gained from India, we shouldn't be self-ruled. So, here we go, moving on. And gentlemen who are doing other things rather than this, better shut it down now. And you know who you are. And so do I. The exchanges favored the British. Britain felt that they were helping the India to modernize, but again, policies favored the British. When Britain flooded India with machines-made textiles, it ruined India's prosperous hand-weaving industry. So it's all about the British. It's not about helping the Indians. It's about what the British can gain. Now, again, remember, this isn't, when we look back on it now, it's like, geez, talk about selfish. But then it made sense, because in their mind, they were helping India modernize. And it didn't really matter the cost. Right, so, say what? Okay. The British encouraged farmers to grow cash crops, and unfortunately they did it to the point where no one was being fed, or they were cutting down the trees and cutting everything to create land for crops, which caused deforestation, which eventually caused a shortage of food and terrible famine. Again, the video talked about that, how bad the famine was. Again, even though the East India Company was gone, Britain still it was about making money. Okay, moving on. Oh, we're coming back to that. Indians were divided in their attitudes towards modernization and Britain. Okay, some Indians did think it was a good idea. The upper class and educated Indians did adopt a more modern way of life. Unfortunately, though, the majority of India didn't. They didn't see the positives or the successes. They were pretty much left poor. Hindu and Muslim religious leaders opposed British-style modernization because, again, the Europeans were coming with what religion? Christianity. So the Hindu and the Muslims, they didn't want that. Okay, so that was devastating to them. They did not want that. Can I go? All right. British were also divided in their attitudes, and not only the Indians were, but the British were as well towards what was happening to India. Indian classics were translated, and many Englishmen gained a lot of respect for their literature, for their religious ideas. We see a lot of those Eastern ideas now. Anyone in this group ever do yoga? Okay. Yeah. Yoga is an amazing thing in terms of like breath control and stamina. It's a very good thing. A lot of the athletes are really, professional athletes have begun to use yoga more and more as a way to improve their skills. So, and that's just one thing. Eastern religion, some things are really interesting, some things are a little strange from our point of view, but they are what they are. However, some English leaders had little respect for anything other than Britain and what was British. There was a saying that was pretty popular back then, that God was an Englishman. Okay, what do you think they meant by that? He was white, yeah. He spoke English. What else?
They were so cool that God was like them.
Yes, they were so cool. Clearly, God had to be just like them. Yeah. In essence. Okay? Now, would we agree with that statement today? No. But that is an example. That statement is an example of what and how they saw themselves then. Because remember, I've said it several times, Britain did colonization better than anybody else. Nobody did it as well, and were as successful as they were. Okay. All right, that should finish your notes, correct? All right, so what do you need to do? Save and upload. The upload is for this week, February, whatever this week number is. Go on. Well, there were two similar. The first one was about India, this one's about Britain. Yeah, yeah.
I see the whole 15 seconds.